Welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Paul Ryan. Today's guest is 𝐃𝐄𝐒. Mike is an entrepreneur, an author, speaker, coach, board director, certified financial planner. The list goes on. Mike specializes in helping us conquer our worries about time and money and ultimately unlocking our true potential. Let's jump on in. Mike, maybe just start by telling us your story. I know we've had a little chat before this, and it seems like some real areas of common interest, and we spoke with some of your passions. Can you tell me a bit of your story and how you ended up in the line of work? I know you're an author, you're a speaker, you're an entrepreneur. How did you end up doing what you're doing?
I started my career after graduated from college, a small private college in North Carolina. I am still involved with that university, Mars Hill University. I'm on the board there, past board chair. But I ended up getting a business degree from that school, not knowing what I wanted to do afterwards. I graduated from the school, a first-generation college student, the first in my family to go to college.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'd come out of college, and my first job ended up being in a textile manufacturing plant that was quite challenging for me because it was a very autocratic, hard-nosed work environment, and I was responsible for leading quite a few people in my first job out of school. And my leadership style was opposite of what the culture was. The culture was very hard. It was a tough job, but it was a great experience for me because I learned what not to do as a leader.
Yeah.
I learned exactly what not to do. I was hired into Macy's in about 2006 and I actually had an opportunity to create the job that I had. So I built a department, a learning and development function, identified the need, and pulled together about 125 people that reported to me across the U.S. I had a team in St. Louis, Missouri, Tampa, Florida, one in Arizona as well, Phoenix, Arizona, and Cincinnati. But during that time, I was noticing, and really throughout my career, a lot of leaders struggling with how to lead well, not only at work, but I was one of those people early on during my career at Michelin. I was getting a lot of great experience and I had the opportunity to do a lot of fun jobs. But my problem there, Paul, was I was working myself to death. I was working 16, 17 hours a day. When I wasn't at work, I was thinking about work. I gained 30 pounds.
Wow.
I wasn't sleeping well at night. I wasn't a very good boss, but people weren't telling me the truth. They told me I was great and I wasn't. Wasn't a very good husband. Over time, I almost had a breakdown, really. And that's what led me going to the doctor, running to the doctor, taking medication, and then finally them scanning my brain and telling me that I did not have anything going on in my brain from a cancer standpoint, but I was under severe stress headed towards depression. And that led me on this journey of thinking things through and walking away from corporate America in 2016-17 to volunteer and to do what I'm doing now.
What really amazes me listening to that story is, in some ways, is very opposite to my story and very, very similar because I've only ever worked in a small business. I didn't go to college. I have no experience of working in these big global organizations. So I've only ever worked in small business. I worked in a business with my father and then built into a business that I now run by myself. But my journey was very similar. My early experiences within our business, this horrible culture, this autocratic leadership style that just doesn't, I don't know if it doesn't really work that well, but it's a generation of people that think it's the best way. And I had a huge struggle to change that. And culture is the number one most important thing in my business now. But I went down a similar road, being at one stage thinking I was going to have a heart attack, literally at my desk thinking I'm going to die from a heart attack, going to the doctor, being told there's nothing wrong with me, all the tests, and the doctor going, do you think it's stress? So it's very, very similar. But what fascinates me is that when you live in that smaller business, privately owned business world, you have the assumption that it's all good for these guys with their big corporate jobs. So thank you for bringing me to the lesson that it's just the exact same, just different scale.
That's a great point. And one of the things that's happening now in my business, and you and I talked a little bit about this, but my focus really is on helping leaders lead themselves well so they can better lead others.
Yeah.
And I'm also focused on helping people conquer worries about time and money, unlocking new possibilities in their lives. And I'm finding a lot of corporate leaders who want to get out of corporate America, but they don't know how. They want to be Paul. They want to run their own businesses.
Yeah.
And I help them figure out what's the best way to do that. And let's make sure you're structuring your money so that you can get there. As you're doing this, it's going to eliminate some of that fear that causes you to lead in a way that might not be who you really are.
Yeah. Yeah.
leading with the hard fist and a hard hand and causing chaos in your organization and creating cultures that aren't healthy and that sort of thing, because you don't want to lose your job, or you can't.
So it seems like you've kind of nailed it there in a way that most people don't think about. You said you don't know who you are, so you're trying to be a leader, but you're actually not connected with yourself, which is why I call the show The Inner Entrepreneur, because I felt that so much of the challenges that I faced, and then so much of the success that I enjoyed, people ask me, how have you did that? And I go, the how is actually 10% of it. The who is the 90% of it, because we can teach anyone the how, A, B, C, D, but if you don't figure out the who, and it's interesting that that's what you find to be the biggest challenge among leaders, that they're starting off but just not being connected with who they are, and then how do we expect them to go in and lead people?
That is so true. And finding out who we are, it takes some work, as you know.
Yeah.
But it's possible. And to get there, we've got to turn off some of the noise, slow down, be a little bit introspective, and we might even have to get help. But looking in the mirror and thinking about the fact that life will end at some point, at the end of that rainbow, at the end of my time here, what do I want to see?
Yeah.
And how do I begin painting that picture today?
And have you a particular process for taking people through that? And do you find, that's my first question, the second follow-on question from that is, do you find people take easily for that, or is there a big resistance when you start working with this inner work as opposed to just the professional work that maybe people expect, for want of a better word?
When I work with clients, it's very difficult to avoid that inner work.
Yeah.
Because I've learned that if you don't do that, as you said earlier, Paul, everything else is really much more difficult. So we spend time up front. We do a couple of things. One of the things I like to do, I do some executive coaching. And as I said, I'm a financial planner. When I have clients bring me in to work with someone, be their business owner, working for a corporation, or even on a nonprofit, the first thing I'll do is get a feel for how this person is showing up today. One of the ways we do that is I meet with the individual and I ask the individual to give me the names of people that report to them, people that might be peers, and also people they might report to. In addition to that, sometimes we'll even go outside of work. Tell me the name of a few of your friends, family members, and a few others that we could talk to, and ask them 3 questions. Number 1, what are Paul's strengths or gifts? Number 2, what are his weaknesses or soft spots? Number 3, what else would you want Paul to know?
Wow.
Take about 15 minutes, gather that information, summarize it, but I'll also send them through assessments, DISC, Enneagram, 16 types, Strength Finders, a few others, and they're in a portal. So they'll go in, they'll take all these assessments, and it'll give them a summary of their leadership styles and certain tendencies that they have. So we review what's in the portal, and not a lot of times people say, yeah, I can see that's me. But then when we get to how that's showing up, how it's impacting people, the way they lead at work, I've seen people break down crying because they didn't even realize it. So that's what we do on the leadership side. But then we get into some other things. I'm a life planner in addition to being a certified planner, executive coach. We get into life planning, and we step back and we ask questions in the life planning world, like, if you had all the money that you'd ever need, you were financially secure, you wouldn't need anything else financially, what would you do with your life? Would you change anything? Let yourself go, design a life that's richly yours. So they spend some time thinking that through, and we come back together. Then I'll ask them, say you go to your doctor now, and your doctor tells you you have 5 to 10 years left to live. Good news is that you won't ever feel sick. The bad news is that you're going to die. What would you do at the time you have remaining? And there are other questions. So we lead them down this path, and it gets to people starting to really think about what matters most to me. And I really, really like that whole process. And there's some other things we do, but that sort of gets at the core of the personal, in addition to the way you're leading yourself and how that's impacting.
I love that. But I'm also thinking that sounds absolutely terrifying. So I'm wondering, would I really like you to contact people that work for me? And I have this impression of your first meeting with a client, and you're breaking the news to them, and they're going, what have I signed? That must be terrifying for people. Is it?
Well,
or is that just me?
Well, it can be, but when you think about the pain that actually has been caused because of this individual's style and behavior.
Yes.
people around them want to see change.
They do.
And a lot of times leaders want to see change, but they just don't know how to change many of them because your natural tendencies tend to be those habits are often hard to break.
But it's also very hard to confront and maybe accept about yourself. It's reminding me of a story of my sons are adults, but when one of them was in school and they had a particularly difficult teacher, they were small, they were 10 or 12 years of age, a particularly troubling teacher that was causing a lot of stress for my son. Not so much stress for him, but she was picking continually on one of his best friends. And that was causing an enormous amount of stress for him. Came to the end of the school year. He was so stressed that my wife just decided to take him out. There was a week or two left and she said, I'm not putting you through it. But she did something that turned out to be very, very profound. She wrote a letter to the school principal and said, this is what my son has experienced for the past 12 months with this teacher. And so she went into the principal and said, look, I'm not making a complaint. I've taken my son out for the next 2 weeks. He's finished. I think he was moving on to senior school. Yeah. I just want you to know this is why. So we handed him the letter. What subsequently happened was the principal took that letter and brought the teacher at the end of the year into his office and handed her the letter. And she got to read this 2 or 3 page letter about how she had impacted on the life of a child. I'm not sure what the exact impact of that was, other than that teacher resigned and never worked again in the school. So being aware of how we impact on other people can be very profound. I wonder if hearing the words of a child, if she finally came face to face as this is the impact I have, and I wonder if it was too much for her to deal with. Do you find that at times that people find it very hard to face up to the impact they're having on other people if it's a negative one?
I do. Some people struggle with that. Mm-hmm. But again, 2 things that I've learned here is, one, so important for us to work harder on ourselves than we do our jobs or our businesses. Easier said than done. That's a Jim Rohn quote.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is we've got to realize that nothing happens good in this world if we're not serving someone else. Mm-hmm. It's not really about Mike at the end of the day.
No.
I mean, you get back to those questions that I mentioned. Most people don't have a personal mission statement. Most organizations have mission statements. Mm. And often I ask people, what is your personal mission statement? A lot of people haven't even thought about that. Mm. I'm a huge proponent of getting clear on your purpose, a vision of what the end of your life looks like. What do you want to see there? And then let's create a mission statement that allows you then to walk that out and to set goals around those things. Mm. And when people take the time to do that type of work, it shifts the attention from them to others, to your son, to other people. Sure. We got to serve people here. Mm. I just had an opportunity to say a few words at the memorial service for a 91-year-old mentor who passed away. And the service was just, it was Wednesday of this week. And I talked a lot about his life and how he lived his life. A big part of who this gentleman was, very accomplished and did a lot of wonderful things, but he was a servant. Mm. And as leaders, in my opinion, business owners, we're servants. You're serving your customer. You're serving as a father, you're serving your family. As a teacher, you're serving your students. And that's what we need to see more of in our world, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned Jim Rohn there, because I've heard that quote before, and I've heard Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and a lot of other speakers and authors speak about this fact that the biggest investment we have to make is in ourselves. Now, the cynic goes, of course, they're selling you. They're selling you something. Yeah. But as someone who has obsessed with personal development for 2 decades, I know it to be absolutely true, because that just pays off so enormously in all areas of your life, in your relationships, your family, your well-being, your wealth. It just pays dividends hugely. But I don't think everyone's open to it.
I agree. It's an investment.
Yeah.
But if you think about yourself, what caused you to make that shift in your life, to turn around? Sounds like it was pain, Paul.
As you asked that question, and which was the same for you.
Yeah.
And the question I asked a guest a couple of weeks ago, and it was interesting because I've done lots of training with the Tony Robbins organization over the years. And my guest was a business strategist for Tony Robbins who had worked with him for about 10 years, which is where I met him and how he ended up being in the podcast. But this was the question I asked him was, obviously Tony Robbins is in the business of change. And it seems that so many people only change when they experience pain. And how do you get to someone before they're in that pain position? I think it's extremely difficult, because when I meet people like you that have made change in their lives and are obviously having an enormous impact then on their society and the world around them, ultimately that pain served something. But would you have ever changed if you hadn't had the pain? Would you still be in corporate America doing your job and traveling around the world?
I probably wouldn't. And
okay.
One of the reasons why I would not was because I met people like Paul.
Yeah.
I started to, for whatever reason, get connected with people who were doing the work on themselves.
Yeah. And you resonated.
Modeling, and I resonated with
Yeah.
that. And it really, had I gotten connected with people like that earlier in my life,
yeah,
I might have avoided that situation that I experienced. So that was one of the things too. I realized after I started to devour a lot of this material, read, to work harder on myself, I realized I had a responsibility to help other people.
Yeah.
So for example, at Macy's, leading a fairly big team of people, I shared that Jim Rohn quote with them, and I encouraged them to live that out.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first did that, they looked at me as if I was crazy. They're like, work harder on ourselves at our jobs, saying,
yeah, you're our boss. Why are you telling us this?
Yes.
Crazy man.
Yes. But once we started to really get that, it transformed our department, our culture.
Entirely. Yeah.
Not just at work. I saw things happen in the lives of people in their home, in the community, and other places. And it was, it was infectious. And we had people who wanted to be a part of our department because they saw this change that went on over the course of a few years.
It's interesting because I remember a time when I hated Monday mornings. We're talking 2 decades ago, but I hated Monday mornings because I hated walking into the business that I was the managing director of, that I was an owner of. I hated walking into that business because it was a horrible place for me to be, because the culture in there was awful. You may say, well, you're responsible for that. You're the owner. And I'd go, yes, I acknowledge that. But nonetheless, I went in there and it was a horrible place for me to be. And I eventually realized, that led me to a point of enormous stress and led me to radically changing that, which was difficult, but I did. But one of the realizations for me was that if this is a horrible place for me to come into on a Monday morning, it must be a horrible place for other people to come into. And as I began to change that into the business it is today, one of the most important things for me was to create a safe environment, because people need to work for a living. They will come in, they will spend more time under your roof than they almost will in their own homes. And it's been so important to me to create an environment where people will walk in on a Monday morning and, feel welcomed, feel cared for, feel respected, feel part of a team. And I stood in front of my staff last week because I was called in to do an annual talk to the staff before Christmas. And to look around a team of people and feel that they are all in that environment, honestly, that means so much more to me than any success in the business, because that impact on human beings is makes me feel that I've done something important.
Congratulations,
thank
Paul,
you,
and thank you for your willingness to make the change. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. It'd be interesting to hear about the process that you went through to become the man you are today. But think about now the number of people who are benefiting from that change that you have made, not only at work, but even through your podcast here and some of the other things you're doing. It's probably really, really incredible, the number of people who are changing and growing and shifting.
Well, you suggested it might have been painful, and obviously that's because your experience, it was painful to change also.
Yeah. Yes, it was. As I look back on it now, it was worth it.
Of course.
It really was worth it. And if I had a chance to do it all over again, would I do it? Probably, because I had a good time, but I sacrificed a lot for that. But one of the things I would have done differently is, again, I would have found people like you. I would have surrounded myself with people who were really starting to figure it out earlier,
Yeah.
and I would have learned from them.
Mm.
As mentors and leaders, we have a great opportunity to impact other people and maybe help them avoid some of that pain. For some of us, it's probably going to be a part of our story, but for others, we can serve people in a way where maybe they avoid some of those hurdles. That's one of the things, Paul, that I enjoy about being an executive coach and a life financial planner. I get to have those conversations with people and do a lot of speaking and that sort of thing early, hopefully early enough to people avoid some of those types of situations.
And it's the thing I love about doing this podcast, because that's how I immerse myself and have conversations with people like you and have conversations with people who are in that space, because without doing this, there aren't so many opportunities to have those conversations. But it's interesting. I get to speak to a lot of CEOs and business owners. I have a lot of connections in that space. And I did a talk to some business owners during the week, and it amazes me. You're sitting in a room of very successful people. You're sitting in a room of millionaires who own their own business. And I start my talk, the first 60% of it is about clarity, purpose, understanding your values, all these sort of things. And you can see it really resonating and connecting with them. But you can see that they got to this place of success in their life without really realizing, oh, all of this stuff is really important, and I really need to connect with all of this stuff. And I think most people look at successful people and think they know all this. And the answer is most of them don't, and they need to hear it.
Yes, yes. And one of the things, too, you mentioned the word success, is actually taking the time to consciously define success.
Absolutely.
For yourself. I think many of us have different types of definitions for success. And a lot of times we have that definition that we did not arrive at ourselves. Maybe it was given to us by all the media messages we see, or what our neighbors are doing or others are doing, and it might not be right for us. And I've seen a lot of people define success based on what I learned as something called the 5 Ps: pleasure, prosperity, power, prestige, and position. Those aren't, they can be bad, depending upon how you look at it. But if that's my only definition of success, I can end up empty.
And what is your definition of success?
To become all I'm created, all I'm designed to be, and helping others do the same, including my family.
So I'm not sure if some plagiarism going on here. I may have to get my solicitors onto you. I'm going to take a note of this, because mine is to be all that I can be and help others be all that I can be. So I'm not happy about that, mate. I thought I was the only one of 7.5 billion to have come up with that. So check your mail. But I think part of that is when you have a passion for being all that you can be, which, by the way, is a never-ending journey. It becomes what your life is about, and you will be like your 91-year-old friend if you're lucky to live that long, and you will still be on that journey. But I think that once you move along that journey, and if you make progress, and if you begin to feel, I am living the life I was born to live, what automatically seems to shift in everyone I've spoken to along the path is it begins to shift to the second part is, I want to help others do the same. It becomes a huge driver.
Oh, yes, yes. I joined an organization, and you've probably heard of Rotary International.
Yes.
So I'm a Rotarian. I joined Rotary in 1998. And one of the reasons I joined the organization is because a lot of what the organization does aligns with my values, the 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build will and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Then there's this motto of service above self. So you got a lot of business owners, a lot of people doing a lot of things, but but thinking that way and making an effort to live that way is something that attracted me. It aligns with my faith in many ways, and it's been wonderful for me. So I get to spend a lot of time, and really now I'm getting to connect with some people literally from all over the world in this organization, and it's been so much fun. And so it's been a learning experience for me as well. And one of the things you said, Paul, just recently is lifelong, basically. You're on a journey, and there's, as long as we live, we'll be learning and growing and changing, and then helping others hopefully do the same. And
one of the other lessons I learned from very early on from Tony Robbins was this. I don't know if you've ever done any of his trainings, but they tend to be quite crazy. In other words, you arrive there in the morning and you stay there till like 11 o'clock at night or whatever. It's almost hellish. But what he's endeavoring to achieve is what he calls immersion. In other words, he's taken you out of your environment for a weekend and he wants to fully immerse you in a different space. And I took that away. It's very like what you've said about surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And that's what I think about immersion. I mean, we are all immersed in the world, which means you'll switch on your TV, you'll switch on your mobile phone. You'll interact with people who don't think this way, who have a different view of the world. And so I do believe that we need to, once we know what's the life we want to live, we need to immerse ourselves within a support system of other people who are on a similar mission, because it's never ending. You're not going to be fixed one day. You need to immerse yourself in that. Certainly that's my belief. You need to surround yourself with the information that will get you there.
What do you see as being the greatest challenge, Paul, with getting business leaders to sort of get some of these things that we're talking about, especially entrepreneurs?
It's a really good question. The greatest challenge, I think, is probably having business owners taking a pause to look inside before they move forward. And you talk about people in the Rotary Club, etc., doing this wonderful service. And I do believe service is really, really important. But we have to serve ourselves as well. And how you serve yourself is stopping for a moment and asking the questions like you phrased earlier. Who am I? What's important to me? What do I want? What's my role in the world? And when you talk about success, I always say that you can never be successful if someone else defines what success is for you. I said once, maybe it seemed arrogant, that I consider myself very successful. But that's because I've defined what success is for me. And so other people go, what are you talking about? You're not successful. And go, you don't define what success is. I've defined. You can never achieve a definition designed by someone else. But if you define success for yourself, I do believe you can achieve that, because it comes from inside and you're probably designed to fulfill that. That's my belief.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. We have to define it for ourselves. One of the things when I think about my own journey and when I actually hit the wall is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
I was not investing my time well. I was putting out a lot of fires, but I wasn't investing my time in the things I should have been invested in my time in. I find that we're not really taught how to manage our time or invest our time. And when you're a business owner, you have a lot of fires to put out. And a lot of business owners are solopreneurs in many respects, and you just don't feel you have enough time in a day. So how do I take the time to work on myself when I've got to keep this thing going and make sure I'm earning enough revenue and income to be able to sustain myself? So you just lose sight of that. And I find that really teaching people how to manage their time or invest their time can help us shift. Just slowing down enough to take maybe 10 minutes a day to reflect and look forward and plan and be thankful can be life-changing.
I think that it's very easy for all of us to get into very, very busy lives, and particularly solopreneur. I'm not a solopreneur, but I can relate to that business of the need to do everything. But you tend to be a busy fool. And those moments of slowing down and deciding, one of the most important things I think any of us can do is to decide what we're doing every day before we enter into that day, to sit down and take a few moments just to decide what our priorities are. But I also think going even deeper than that, we all need to decide what our I call them our unique personal drivers, what our fundamental drivers in life are. And for me, that's 4 buckets I'm only ever filling. So the clarity that gives me is I go, there's a million things in the world, but I'm only interested in 4. So I'm only interested in filling these 4 buckets. And I've looked at all the others and they don't interest me. I'm only interested in these. So that gives me clarity. Okay, so I'm only interested in doing these 4 things. And then I always have that clarity of what it is I'm doing in my life. But I lived that way for many, many years. And then I decided I need to do something similar in my business. So I decided it came into 5 things. When I engage in my business, and I have a management team that run my business, but when I engage in my business, what are the things I'm interested in? Okay. Don't know about anything else. I'm just interested in these things. So I think maybe that's a little bit extreme for people, but the simple thing for people running their own business or anyone is just sit down every day at the beginning of the week, what you want to do for the week, what you want to do for the day, and taking control of your diary. But I'd love to move on to the life plan thing. As it happens, on my desk here beside me, randomly, I have this book. It's about, as you can see, I don't know if you can see it, like it's literally about 70 pages long. And this is my life plan. I don't know many people who have a life plan. And it's something I did many, many years ago. I went away to London for a 4 or 5 day course where we spent 4 or 5 days working on this. Mm-hmm. I came back from that course and I spent about 2 weeks solidly working on this until I created this full life plan. It could have been 10 or 12 years, or I don't really remember. And now over Christmas every year, I revisit it. Mm. It's such a wonderful tool. Can you tell me a bit about your life plan and your life planning process for people?
Yes, my life planning process. By the way, congratulations on
Thank you.
Taking the time and making the investment. 4 days, I'm sure a person like you, it's a significant investment to do that. Mm. It sounds like the return that you've gotten on that investment of time has been significant.
Enormous.
Yes. My life planning process, George Kinder, the Kinder Institute of Life Planning, I actually went through that process like 3 years ago. It took me about a year to get through it. And wow. Part of the training that you go through, you're required to basically develop your own life plan.
Mm. Which is the hardest part.
It's the hardest part. It really is the hardest part. Yeah. But what it did for me was it allowed me to take the time to do what you and I've already talked about. Mm. Just clarify my purpose, get a vision of what my life will look like if I only had 24 hours left to live. What would I do with the time I have remaining? More importantly, what are the things I've missed doing, being, or seeing? But taking the time to reflect on some of those things myself helped change me. And the book that I've written, this book came from my life plan.
Leaderfluence.
It's a book, Leaderfluence.
Wow. Impressive. Congratulations. What an achievement.
Well, thank you. That's one of the things that came from my life plan. But as far as my process, you asked about my process. When I work with clients who are interested in life planning and really financial planning, I like to take some time to get clear on really what they want in life. What do you want? Why do you want it? What are you willing to do to get it? What is it going to take to get it? Who's going to hold you accountable for getting it? How will you feel when you get it? And how will you help someone else get what they deserve? Mm. So that's part of it. But it starts with just a lot of questions, asking questions up front, open-ended questions, listening to them with energy and emotion to get a feel for who they are and what they're looking for. That first session, it's basically just a get-to-know-you session. After that, I actually provide tools for them to go work on. And some of those tools are identifying the top 4, those areas in their lives. Mm. What are dreams? What are their wishes in some of these important areas of life? And they go back, they do some planning, they do some writing, and they'll come back and we'll talk about that a little bit. And then I'll give them those 3 questions that I just shared. First one on, you've got all your resources, all the resources you'll ever need. What would you do with your life? Would you change anything? Let yourself go, design the life that's richly yours. They'll work through that. Then we'll come back and we'll give them the 5 to 10 years left to live. Hmm. What would you do with the time you have remaining? And then we get question 3. So they'll answer those questions. And if it's a couple, they will do those separately. And when we come back together, we'll have a meeting and I'll start with one, then they ask the other one to be quiet. And then I'll go to the other one. And there are so many things that are uncovered in those types of sessions. Hmm. At the end of that session, when we've gone through those questions, I'll paint a picture of what I heard to get to their heart's core. Mm. And so we come up with those areas that they really want to focus on, that really matter to them. And then we'll go through, okay, so these are the things you want to work through. What could get in the way? How will you overcome those things? What steps are you going to take? Who's going to hold you accountable? And then we walk through that. And that's building out the plan. Oftentimes money comes up. Hey, I want to leave my job next year, whatever. So we can use the financial planning side of it. But then there are some other steps that they'll need to take that I can help hold them accountable for. So just in general terms, that's how the process works. I have really gone through the life planning with people, and I've seen people change completely. Mm. They were headed in one direction, and they realized, wait a minute, we need to be going in this direction. And they made some pretty radical changes in their lives, and we're happy that they did.
It sounds like an amazing particularly amazing for a couple to go through it, because I'd imagine they would learn so much about each other, which is a wonderful thing. What is impressing me so much and seems quite unique, is that you go from this stage of getting people to ask those basic questions, the who am I, getting to know themselves, to creating a whole life plan, which is an incredible thing, and linking that into financial planning, which I think is absolutely an amazing thing, because ultimately you have to get to the practical, because all of our dreams and hopes, and everyone doesn't want to be a multimillionaire, which is fine. This is about defining what success is for you. But it does require some degree of financial stability, because if you and I are broke, we're not enjoying this conversation. Right. And so whatever the life is you want to live. So I love that you do that. And it seems like a natural process. But also, just like I said earlier, so many people don't seem to want to do that personal work. As someone who's pretty obsessed with their financial life, it also seems to me that most people don't want to do that work on their finances either.
And finances, and it's probably true in your country as well, but in the United States, financial literacy, teaching people about money is not something that's the norm.
No.
So I find that a lot of people are intimidated by it. They understand what's important, but they don't know where to start. They're capable of even understanding it. And even the financial planning industry, we've made it so complex until people, they avoid it. So yes, I agree with you, but when we can get back to what matters most to them, the why here, purpose, like for us, we understand the purpose thing, but what's your purpose and how can money help you get there? There are a lot of people who want to be able to just give.
Yeah.
Well, how can you put yourself in a position where certainly you can take care of your family and then have enough to give? So I find that spending that time up front on goals or getting clear on their purpose can really help make the life planning, the financial planning process easier. And because for me, I don't really take custody of assets. I build plans and my clients execute.
Yeah, of course.
They really have to have a desire to lead into this. But my goal really is to spend more time up front so that we get to the financial part.
They really want to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes. I was having a conversation with some friends a number of years ago, and I try and stay off financial conversations because it's one of my passions, and it's, not everyone wants to hear you ramble on about it, but so I'm careful. But it's having this conversation, and one of my friends was really into hearing more about it because she wanted to obviously do this herself, and her partner didn't want to have the conversation. He didn't want to get into it at all. So there was a disconnect there of one of them going, we need to plan a financial future, and the other going, we don't. And my suspicion was that to some degree he was afraid to look at it because you may have to confront that you're not in the best situation you're in. So I think sometimes people don't look at their finances for the same reason they don't look at a lot of other things, because they're afraid to confront it. But of course, if you never confront it, you never fix it.
Yeah. There's a quote that I love, and we use it for Kelly Financial Planning, but our executive coaching business, which my wife works in with me, Right Path Enterprises. And it's by Ella Fitzgerald. She was a jazz singer, passed away many years ago. She says, it's not where you've been, where you are going that counts. So we can just get stuck in the past and not realize that there's so much more ahead. And that's where life planning, in my opinion, and good coaching, financial coaching comes in, helping people stop and figure out where they want to go. Not where I've been, but where do I want to go? And how do I take the steps? Although they might be uncomfortable, and you and I know pain.
Yeah.
At the end of that, you might find a little bit of joy, because we all deserve freedom. When the money's right, there's a little bit less stress in the business.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I know very few people experience is, I'm going to say financial freedom, but I know a lot of people who you would define as financially free. I know very few people who have what I call real financial freedom, where they have time freedom as well. And that's the unique thing. And it can take a lifetime to work towards. And thankfully, when my sons were young, it was something I lectured about them always, because I think good financial planning starts when you're 20 years of age. By the time they get to our age, the job is done. If you invest and let the compounding do its work, but if you start late, it's a very, very difficult job.
It really is. But again, it's not where you've been, it's where you're going that counts. Even if you can't achieve that higher level of success from a financial success,
you can make some change.
Maybe there's something in the middle or at a lower level. You can give up some things, but you can find And the other thing I will
Ignoring
share,
it is certainly not going to help.
that's not going to help. And the other thing I'll share is there are people I have met who have more money than they will ever spend.
Yeah.
And they are still missing something.
Yes.
And that's the other side of this life planning. Whether you have a little or a lot, it all comes back to your purpose, your goals, what matters most to you. And spending the time there can make whatever you have much more meaningful. I'll share, I went on a trip to Nicaragua, Pastoral Las Flores. It was a Rotary trip. And we went there to build a feeding center for 250 kids to get clean water to a village.
Mm.
And from a resource standpoint, the people there didn't have very many resources. They didn't have much. But there was a lot of joy, a lot of happiness.
Mm. And as we all know, there's people with so much, but with no joy.
Yes.
And Mike, it's been a wonderful and enlightening conversation. I am quite amazed by the work you're doing. It seems so holistic that it almost like you're taking someone on this full journey of self-exploration, personal leadership, to ultimately financial planning. It seems like a really holistic service yourself and your wife are providing. So congratulations on that and well done.
Thank you, Paul. I feel that it's a blessing to have the opportunity to do the work that I do. And I'm certainly enjoying it. And it's always great to meet people like yourself who you're on a similar path. Thank you for all that you're doing. It matters.
So obviously we're on the other side of the planet. I presume you do some remote work with people. If people want to get in touch, where can they find you?
Yes, I do a lot of remote work. Most of my work is actually remote. I do have an office that I can use if needed here in Cincinnati area. But people can find me on all the social media platforms. I'm there, Mike Kelly. They can also find me at Right, like take a right, right.com. And my other website, the financial life planning website, is Kelly Financial Planning, ELLY financialplanning.com. You can find me there. Always open to talking to people, meeting with them, just to hear their stories, to see if or how I can be of service to them achieve all that they're capable of and all that they deserve to achieve while here on this earth.
Well, Mike, from what I've heard, it sounds like contacting you would be a smart move. So it's been a pleasure. And thank you very, very much for taking the time to speak to me on the podcast.
You're welcome, Paul. Thank you again. I've really enjoyed our time together.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure.